Good morning, everybody. This is Matt with Austin, Texas Gardening. Today, we're going to be doing a backyard garden tour. And so this is kind of, in part, a garden tour and also an urban gardening video. I obviously live in a suburban space, and there's only about 16 feet from where I'm standing on my patio to my back fence here. So my backyard is not the biggest backyard. If I step down here and kind of pan around, you can really see what we're working with. I mean, it is a smaller space. Obviously, I'm from Austin, and so if you're from Austin as well, you're aware that the housing market in Austin is kind of crazy. I'm also a millennial, and so I don't have the deepest pockets. And I was thinking about doing a video on the process of purchasing this house, and obviously something gardening, or backyard gardening at least, is something I've gotten into following buying this house. Again, that's a whole totally different video, but I paid $250,000 for this house. And you might be wondering, like, why would you want a quarter of a backyard for that much money, especially if you live in a smaller Texas town? I'm not saying stay away from Austin, but the housing market is pretty nuts here. That being said, my backyard is 40 feet on this longer wall and 16 feet behind me, so that's a 640 square foot backyard. Additionally, if you've seen my first YouTube video, you know that my backyard isn't level. You can really see what I'm talking about. So, like, my fence isn't level. My whole backyard is sloped downward, which is fine because, like, I don't have, like, drainage problems or anything. But, yeah, that is one of the things that I just have to deal with. And so, anyway, we're going to be taking a look at this garden bed here. If you take a look at my first YouTube video, you'll see the process of how I dug this out and just some of my comments on doing that. I don't recommend you go about it in the same way that I did, but I've still gotten a lot of joy out of this. And so we are going to be just taking a look at this today. So I really get a lot of joy out of this garden bed. I think it's really fun to grow fruit and vegetables at home. And the first thing we're going to be taking a look at is this peach tree. So just about 2 weeks ago, I did a peach tree update. And 3 weeks ago, I did a peach tree blossom time lapse of this La Feliciana peach tree here. And this is one of the first things I planted back in March of 2020 when the pandemic started. It didn't fruit last year, but it looks pretty promising this year. We got peaches coming out all over it, really. And I've seen bees all over this thing. It's obviously a little overcast, was drizzling this morning, so it's not really, we're not having a whole bunch of bees out today, but I think this peach tree is pretty cool. I'm anticipating in May or June, this peach tree really putting out some fruit. I obviously have another peach tree over there, but we're going to wait to talk about that one. I want to finish talking about this garden bed. So additionally, last November, I planted a winter garden, and I planted cabbage, cauliflower, and celery, as well as some Swiss chard, which I've since eaten. And it's been partly successful, partly not successful. So to explain what's not been successful, the cabbage and the cauliflower. This is the cabbage and the cauliflower. It looks somewhat healthy, just at a glance, but considering that it's been in the ground at this point since November, it hasn't really developed. We don't have any really productive, cabbage heads here. I mean, there's leaves. I guess I could eat those leaves, but I think it's in part due to the perhaps the soil density or the poor soil quality that I've used here. And I think a bigger part of this issue is that my house, these 3 windows are facing, I guess, north. So in the winter, the sun rises on the other side of my house, which means this big sloped, if I back up here, this big sloped incline is in the shade of my house all winter. And so these things would get maybe an hour of sun tops directly every morning. And I think just the lack of sunlight, they haven't really thrived. I don't really even think it's because of the winter storm or anything, but on a unrelated, or well, I guess a related note, the celery's done awesome. I think I'm definitely going to try to do celery again next year for a winter garden. If I lower my camera here, you can see, like, not every one of these is looking like supermarket quality, but I think they're on the cusp of really being something I can harvest, and here in about a month, I'm excited to do that. Maybe about a week ago, not a week ago, what am I talking about? A month ago, I cut all my Swiss chard, made a salad, it was pretty cool, and wanted to just plant some spring garden stuff. I've been kind of frustrated because I've been just sitting here waiting on this cabbage and celery, even though it's April at this point, and haven't really been able to do spring gardening stuff, but I wanted to make some space for some new plants. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is this bowl of slugs here. So I have a celery plant, and the slugs are really going to town on everything, not celery, what am I saying? I have a strawberry plant. And the other day, I started noticing stuff like this. Ugh, that's gross. I got one on me. Yeah, the slugs, they love strawberries. And they're eating mine, which is really frustrating. So, I did this. So last year when I did this, I used light beer. This year, I'm using a little bit more hoppy IPA. I don't know what the slug's preference is, but we're gonna just pour some beer into a bowl here, take it outside. Slugs absolutely love this beer. So we're gonna just set it down here next to our strawberry plant. Wait for them to smell it. And I guess we'll give them a new beer every 2 or 3 days. And by the next day, obviously, have caught dozens. I don't even know how many that is. It's kind of probably hard to see from the video, but slugs clearly love beer. And I'm going to be putting a fresh beer out for them this morning because I want my strawberries. You can see some of these are looking pretty good, like ready to pick. Look at that there. That's nice. It's good quality. But this strawberry plant, if you look in the background of my peach tree blossom video, you can see it on the ground. When I bought it, it didn't have any strawberries on it, and now, got a nice little crop coming up here. And so the life cycle for strawberries, they'll grow these white flowers, and in the center of the flower, that's where the fruit comes from. And I've got probably about a dozen out here, and I'd like to actually enjoy them and not just feed them to the slugs. So we got that plant, obviously classic gardening herbs, cilantro, basil, and these two plants here are habanero plants. I think will be making some fruit shortly. The way that they produce is they'll be like these little white bell looking things. They don't really have too much coming out right now. I think there's just like the proto fruit formations on the top, but this is a cool little spring gardening bed, and this strange plant here is also cilantro. This is actually from last year's plant, and when cilantro lives for a sufficient amount of time, this plant, for the record, has not been here for a year. I think it grew in like January, and after 5 to 6 months of not being trimmed and not eating any of the cilantro, it eventually grows really high in this kind of weird looking way and puts off these little blossoms, and then it grows coriander, and you can harvest the seed and start all over. So I think this in-ground bed is really cool. It's just a fun thing to do as far as like urban gardening in small spaces is concerned. Again, the lot that I live on is 4,400 square feet, and my backyard is 640 square feet. So I'm kind of limited in my options, but I've really tried to make the best out of it, and I've gotten a lot of joy from this little backyard bed. And so for the record also, I didn't really explain the wire cage. I put up some little posts and chicken wire because last year I tried to grow strawberries as well. And we have a lot of bunnies in our neighborhood, which is super cute, obviously, but my wife loves them. I don't. They come and eat strawberries. So I guess honestly bunnies are better than slugs, but we're gonna try to get something out of this. So anyway, moving on, I have this peach tree. So again, about 2-3 weeks ago, I did a 4-month update on transplanting this peach tree. I've had a lot of feedback, primarily on Reddit, about things I've done wrong when I initially dug this up from Blanco, Texas, and moved it over to my backyard, but I think it's turning out pretty cool. And unlike this peach tree, where there's already clear fruit growth on the tree. This peach tree is in a pretty cool intermediate stage where you can see the full process of how the flowers turn into fruit. So if I move a little closer here, you can see it's still trying to put out its leaves, still getting ready for summer. And if I find some blossoms, this is obviously classic spring peach tree blossoms. These are honestly wearing even right now, but like here's another one. And basically what happens after about a month, the blossoms will shrivel up and kind of start turning brown. And out of the center, you see this wispy green looking thing. Like some more examples, kind of like that. Or this is a really good example, like dried up, if I can get it to focus, dried up dead flower with a little green thing poking out in the middle. And that little green thing is the fruit. So again, this peach tree is in kind of an intermediate stage where it's just getting ready to start putting out fruit. And obviously, not every one of those flowers turns into fruit, but on my tree, we're kind of close to that. And that means, hundreds and hundreds of peaches. This thing, I don't really, well, my camera's super out of focus. I don't really have a count. I wouldn't be able to count the amount of blossoms this tree put out. Way over 100. So hopefully the squirrels don't go to town on them. Hopefully I actually do have some peaches in May or June, but I really love the way this tree turned out. Even if I don't get fruit from this, my neighborhood is new, as you can tell from the no trees in people's backyards. It's just nice to have a tree. It's nice to, have something green in the summer. Not even for shade, but just for fun. So around the bed of this tree, I planted some cucumber, and I kind of wanted that to climb the base of the tree. I still need to put up like a trellis or something, but I also planted a bluebonnet bed. And I did a wildflower video for Easter, which I was kind of frustrated that I couldn't include this in the video because it hadn't been putting out any flowers yet, but I think this is going to look really wonderful here in a couple of weeks. Obviously, we got the first bluebonnets poking out of this bed. You can kind of tell like that little thing there is going to be one, but they're just now getting ready to come out. And any way you cut it, a late bloom is cool for this too. If we wind up doing like another peach tree update and there is fruit on the tree, it'd be cool to also have flowers around the base. So if I back up here, I can kind of pan around and you can see the whole space. Again, I'm working with 640 square feet here on my small suburban 4,400 square foot lot. It isn't the biggest backyard, but it's mine. And I love it. So before we leave the backyard, I want to get a good shot of the space that we're working with. Just really show you guys my whole backyard. Not sure what angle is best. One of these might wind up being the thumbnail, but get a little lower. Yep. So it's been really fun gardening in the back, and working with this small space, I feel, has turned out super well. All right, so we're out here in the front yard, and it is a little bit windy, so I don't know if the audio is going to turn out okay on this, but this is also one of the small space front yard beds that I'm working with. I'm kind of standing at a different angle than I normally do because of the wind, but the normal angle I stand from is kind of usually over here. I like to present my wildflowers and whatnot, but I think this is going to work better for us this morning. So down here, following the winter storm, I planted some tomatoes, and those are turning out really well. I want to get a little bit closer. Yeah, those tomatoes are looking great, and every one of these yellow flowers, or at least most of them, will likely turn into tomatoes as well. So we have all around a ton of tomatoes. I've obviously planted a whole bunch of wildflowers, which you guys can check out in my previous video. And in our terracotta pots over here, we have jalapenos, habaneros, and in that yellow, or rather orange bucket, that is our sweet potato from the sweet potato video I did about 2 months ago. Finally, in the front yard over here, I have a couple of different trees, and I'm gonna zoom in here in a minute, but I originally had 2 live oak trees here. And, you know, as Jesus says, if a tree does not produce fruit, cut it down. But I know he's talking about the state of our hearts. I feel that applies to gardening too. I honestly really don't have a lot of space to work with and don't want to waste it on boring trees that just produce allergens and do not produce fruit. So here's some closer shots of my trees. Finally, we have these wildflower beds, which again, I just did a video on the other day. These things are lovely. I absolutely love the color on these bluebonnets and crimson clover, but this isn't a wildflower video. We did that last week. And again, if you compare the amount of foliage just of the bluebonnets alone to the video from last week, they've grown significantly. So I kind of do want to show them off, but they look great. These are bachelor buttons, these blue things. They look kind of like dandelions. I've been worried my HOA is going to hit me up. Like if you stand from the street, I've been worried my HOA is going to hit me up and say, dude, you need to cut that. But these are hiding a fig tree. So this fig tree was one of the first trees I bought in March of 2020 as well. You can't really see it with all this stuff here, but there it is. And this thing put out about a dozen figs last year. I've been working on a fig video, which I was going to release October of last year. I decided against it, but I think this spring, when we start getting some figs, I will make that video. And right now, it's just starting its first phase of growth. I don't think there's any fruit on this thing right now, but here in a little bit, there should be. So we'll see. Moving on, we have this apple tree, which I've made a couple of videos about at this point. It's a Fuji apple tree. It's pretty interesting. It's not doing very much right now. It obviously is putting out just a little bit of color, a little bit of growth, because it is spring. I've been thinking about doing like a grafting video. I want to kind of graft in like a Granny Smith or something onto this apple tree because I want it to be pollinated, and Fujis are not self-pollinating. But I'm anticipating here in a little bit it's going to have some more foliage. It's not that interesting right now. What I'm really excited to talk about is my olive tree. So there's a whole discussion that could be had about this olive tree, which I'm planning on doing next week for my post deep freeze winter storm. I tried to save this olive tree, and obviously every other tree I have is doing just fine. This olive tree was once majestic. I'm going to back up to really show the scale of the devastation. It was once large. I've made an olive brining video. If you look at January, I think 7th, I uploaded a video on how I picked and brined olives from this tree, and it was one of my favorite trees. But the winter storm, I thought had killed it. Thankfully, it did not, and you can see it's regrowing from the base. It only had one branch following the storm, this one right here, which survived and stayed green. Everything else turned brown. And so this tree's a trooper, and I'm glad he is still with us, but there's some more pruning that needs to happen, and this probably will not be producing any olives this year. But obviously I'm pretty limited with my ability to grow things being on a smaller property, and I just wanted to do a walkthrough today and show you guys some of the things I'm growing, show you guys my wildflowers, show you guys my vegetable gardens, and yeah. Appreciate you guys watching. Stay tuned next week for the winter gardening guide conclusion for the 2020-2021 season. Thanks, everybody.